Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you for joining this learning experience brought to you by Mezmo. My name is Cody, and welcome back to Techstrong Learning. We have an exciting program ahead, but before we dive into things, I have just a couple of notes I'd like to review with everyone. First of all, we are recording our session today. So if you miss any of our discussion, you'd like to rewatch this discussion, or of course, if you'd like to share this discussion with the rest of your team, we will be sending you a recording shortly after we conclude this live session today. Additionally, if you would like to be involved, get involved, send in your thoughts throughout our program today. There are a couple of ways to do so. The first option is to use the chat tab on the right side of your screen. And when you find that chat tab, I'd like you to let us know from where in the world you are joining us from. Now, if you have any specific questions, we do want you to send those into the Q&A tab on the right side of that chat section. We'll be holding most questions toward the end, so feel free to send them in throughout our program, but we'll be sure to circle back around to them. Additionally, if you jump to our handout section, you'll see there are some resources there for you, so feel free to grab those. And we will be selecting 2 of our most engaged attendees today to win a $50 Amazon gift card. So be sure to send in your thoughts, your concerns, your questions, and of course, fill out our post-webinar survey. So today's discussion is around data profiling, the secret map of your telemetry data landscape. I'm joined today by Marc Phillips, Principal Customer Success Manager at Mezmo, and Brandon Shelton, Solutions Architect at Mezmo as well. So Marc and Brandon, thank you both so much for joining us today on Techstrong Learning. Marc, do you want to dive us right into our presentation?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining today. Our goal will be obviously to walk through, help you understand what is your telemetry data landscape and where's the secret map. We know there's a number of different roles on the call today, so we will make sure to address at multiple levels, make sure there's something for everyone, and then have some clear actionable steps you can take at the end, depending on what is most important to your role, job, and your business. So what we're going to go through is establish effectively what is one of the biggest problems in DevOps today that's growing. We'll kind of look at some common scenarios for data profiling, and then a little bit of a deeper dive into what it is and why it's important. And then also understanding the results from that. What can you do about it? And then also how to make sure that once you understand your data, you're able to take the appropriate actions based on that. And then, as I mentioned, we'll look into how to get started. So as today you have myself. I'm a Principal Customer Success Manager. I've been here for about 2 years. Prior in my career, I was an engineering manager at Microsoft, and then I've also done enterprise consulting across a number of companies. The upshot of that being I've seen a lot across different companies and industries, and also seen a lot of common patterns. And so it's been exciting to come here to Mezmo to really be able to tackle one of the most common patterns that we've seen, which is around the increasing volume of data that is coming from the systems, and how to appropriately understand your business and your operations in the midst of that at a reasonable cost. Brandon?
Yeah, my name is Brandon Shelton. Been at Mezmo for a little over a year now as solutions architect. I've got a very strong data background. Been working for large companies, small companies, so I've seen a lot of the technology landscape and how things have evolved and changed, specifically in kind of the telemetry data space over the years. So,
great. So, as we all know, again, data volumes. This is all the logs, metrics, traces, everything else from all the systems. Understandably, in order to get the observability that you want into your operations, both to look at trends, optimizations, or respond during incidents, it's just increasing every day. And the problem is that the value of that data is not. So you have sort of guaranteed costs are rising, but more data doesn't always mean that it turns into value for your business or helps you get your job done better. And so what we've just seen, like I mentioned, there's a very, very linear curve of the increasing costs, but then the value is not, and it's growing over time. And it's such a difficult dance between making sure you're generating enough visibility into your systems with logs and metrics and traces and other methods. But again, if you're responsible for both managing this infrastructure that handles it all and the costs associated, that can become a problem, as well as for SREs and people who are acting on data in the middle of an incident, how to find what you need if there's so much noise in the system. And so this is where data profiling can come in, because, for example, again, the only way to help increase that signal and reduce that noise is to really get a handle on understanding what is all this data that's coming through. And some of you are responsible for budgets and controlling costs. Others aren't. You just need to get your work done with the data. And so, but what you need to worry about is that at some point, the people who are responsible for the costs are going to be forced to turn down the throttle or on the amount of data that you're able to get to do your job. And so what data profiling will let you do is let you both prepare, so you can identify and understand that if you need to cut your costs by, say, even 50%, that you can very accurately say, here's actually the 50% that I don't need to do my job. And that's how everyone can win of dramatically reduced costs without sacrificing observability. And in many cases, actually increasing your observability by enabling you to amplify or transform the data that you do need as a result of what you learn from data profiling. So again, it's just teams are struggling today, as you know, and again, we'd love to hear any specific challenges y'all are having. We can go into those at the end of the session. But again, there's too much data. It's unpredictable, high volume, and not always valuable. It's often not in the right format. Like we have a customer who has systems ranging from modern AI hardware and tools to airport kiosks that are running an OS from 30 years ago. And so often quite a bit of transformation is required in order for any modern tools to make use of that data. And then what's in it, back to like, how do you decide what you can cut back on and what you need more of if you don't understand it? And then it's often not in the right place. That if it all comes into one system, there's a lot of great tools today that you want your security data in some tools. You want other business analytics and other tools, or just during an incident you just want all the debug info into a place where you can readily access it. And so again, by gaining a clear understanding through profiling, you can also make sure the right data that you need is not only in the right format but gets routed to the best tool for the job and to the team who needs it at the time. So the approach to all this, of just this continuing flow of data and need to control costs and get data to the right people at the right time and in the right format, Mezmo looks at it sort of there's three aspects of this. Number one is understand the data. And that's primarily what Brandon will dive in deeper to today, around how do you profile the data? How do you identify the patterns and the redundancy and do some aggregation and other things that you can learn there. But then we'll also touch on, once you understand your data, how can you optimize it? And this is where telemetry pipeline comes in, that we'll talk about, of how to actually reduce that redundancy or transform something or do some routing. And then respond. This is something that as we've talked to different companies and our customers have gone down this road, is one thing we consistently hear that's a concern is, well, great, I've reduced the volume of data, maybe I drop debug messages, or I sample what's coming through, and all these things that on a day-to-day basis, both in terms of controlling costs but still getting the observability you need to ensure your system is healthy. What happens when suddenly you're in the middle of an incident and you suddenly a lot of that information that you really don't need day to day would actually help you respond faster? And that's why we'll show you a way of how to quickly turn off one or all of the various optimizations you put in during an incident in order to get everything that you need at the time, but then easily go back to your more optimized approach once the incident is resolved. And so, let's kind of a good overview. Now let's really dive into what is data profiling, and how it can be useful to you. I'll turn it over to Brandon.
Hey, thanks, Marc. So really great question here in the chat, which is, what's the connection between telemetry data and data profiling? And we get that a lot when we talk to customers, when we talk to people that are interested in this. So think of telemetry data as it's the data about your apps, your systems, right? It's the what's happening in my ecosystem. When we talk about this kind of data profiling, we're actually talking about what's the metadata or the data about that telemetry data, right? So it's the, where is all the data coming from? What all hosts is this data coming from? What applications is things coming from? Are there certain patterns that we're seeing from this data? How much volume is being sent through? What's the average size of a log that's going through? And it's all real information that you could can see that's out there as part of what we're offering here at Mezmo, and it really gives you that insight into the data about your applications and your systems, and it's slightly different than the just telemetry data, right? It's the data about your data there, and so we for us, like, we kind of put more of a spin on that to say, hey, like, what kind of patterns are coming through this, right? What in that noise is super valuable? What's not valuable to you? And really, from an engineering perspective, kind of start to spur that conversation of, hey, do we need this thing, right? So if we have an application that starts sending a ton of data through, a pipeline or through, to a log analysis system, we may want to track that or get trends with that. And so for us, one of the things that we do is we actually add profiling as part of our service or our offering, and then that data changes over time, right? And so as things change in your ecosystem, it's good to stay on top of that as well. And so for us, we kind of term that as what we say is continuous profiling, so that as things move in your ecosystem, as application developers, as engineers release things into the wild or the environment, if you're sitting in an SRE role, a lot of times you find out about that stuff after it's happened, after something's already been shipped to production, or something else has stood up, and sometimes you can get caught off guard by that, right? And so your systems, if you're talking about a log analysis solution that's in the cloud, you're a SaaS provider that's out there, whether it's Splunk or Datadog, right? Any of those that are kind of on the shelf, a lot of times, like, you're not going to get notifications, you're not going to get alerts out of the box that say, hey, this thing has increased in volume, right? Or this thing has went kind of sideways, or this new stuff's popped up. In fact, one of the customers that we worked with, we actually had a solution that we solved for them in which they had turned on a brand new SaaS or SSO provider at their company. And one of the recommendations was to turn on debugging. And they were trying to troubleshoot some stuff. And that was cool for a little while until it really started to increase their bill, and really started to see the impacts of that 30 days after they had done that, right? And so with continuous profiling, the idea is, like, we're going to give you alerts, notifications, things that have changed in your ecosystem of your telemetry data before you kind of get hit with a bill, or before something bad happens, right? And so really, it's following that drift, following the changes that are happening in your software, in your ecosystem, right? From there, what we do here is we actually give you options to reduce that. So a lot of times we have conversations with SREs or engineers out here where you know they may need to go make a change. Let's say some new metrics come in, right? And it's really causing a lot of havoc downstream with the system. That could be, there's too many unique metrics. There's too many labels on things. When you have to go change that stuff, usually that looks like I go patch something at the agent, right? That's either running on the host or running on the server. And that requires, kind of a full stack deploy and lots of things in that world. What we want to do, or where we try to drive some of this, is to say, hey, like, let's put that at your fingertips. We're going to make things super easy for you to either take this metric, and aggregate it up, take some logs that we may want to convert to a metric over here, or even just drop this pattern. I know some of the case studies that we've done with this stuff is that if you want to just simply redact something, right? If I just want to get rid of this log line, if I want to, start tampering down things from a host, I have two choices. One of those is I need to go patch my code on the application if I can. Sometimes you can't because that's an application or a framework that you pull in that you don't have control over, right? Or I need to go patch my agent and do it as close to the source as possible. And that's really, really hard. And so for us, that's where, the thought or notion of like, let's go drop that without having to patch agents or patch applications, and, get as close to that middleware, and then have that conversation back with the application teams or the engineering folks that are a lot of times pushing those logs. Do you need this? Is this valuable? That kind of thing, right? So really kind of give you a quick estimate of, hey, if we do get rid of this data, what's that going to cause downstream? Like, can I reduce something by 20 or 30%?
Brandon, one quick thing, just to respond to David in the Q&A around is telemetry kind of a Mezmo buzzword for data profiling, and really a better way to think about it. So last week, I was out in Las Vegas at the Gartner Analyst IT conference, and telemetry data is actually Gartner's buzzword, or their term of how they are defining, again, these logs, metrics, and traces that are being generated by systems. And kind of one of their key, in their keynote kind of address to the attendees was effectively, you need to start figuring out getting a handle on your telemetry data via some sort of pipeline or some sort of centralized method. And so then the data profiling is basically like what Brandon is showing, is the analysis of all that telemetry data, creating that map of your data landscape effectively, so that then you can leverage a telemetry pipeline to reduce, transform, and route that data. So hopefully that helps. And along the lines of what Brandon's been talking about, it's almost impossible to get a handle on your data without something like this, like the shock that we've gotten from customers who we've worked with, of the, like, in the first glance of the first run of the profiler, we can see that literally up to 50% of all their logs that are going through are garbage, just like some repetitive line over and over and over, that they had no idea that their systems were generating. And so it makes it so, again, like, that's really of what to expect. Is we've seen, again, 25 to 50% just off the top of low-hanging fruit that no one even really had to make any tough decisions on whether they wanted to keep that data. They didn't know. Some developer added it in during debugging and original development, and didn't realize the impact that was going to have. And so what the profiling does is give you that view into your telemetry data to understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, like, that has been, I think, out of all the customers I've worked with on this specifically to try to implement a solution, is that's what we're finding is at least 25% can be kind of cut out immediately. And usually that's like one or two conversations that they have to have with somebody, right? With whether that's an engineer or whoever is like, oh yeah, I really don't need that, or oh, I accidentally turned that on, kind of thing. And so absolutely. And that's kind of why the profiling thing becomes super, super important, to your organization, is to understand all that data that's going through. And then again, as things change now, you're getting more, the next time that things pops up, and now we see a 25% increase of the same log or this application. It's like, oh, let me go actually change that and go ask the questions of people, and then give you options to, redact that right there. All right. So from an optimized perspective, once you start figuring out where your data is, at, and you get a good profile of the data, you want to take action on it, right? And so we actually have ways that you can trim out events that you don't need. There's things that you can filter and duplicate, that are just extraneous. So one of the things that I worked on with a customer was to actually aggregate up. They were running some ETL stuff in the background, and all those ETL jobs produce, a bunch of log data, and it was basically like, hey, how many records have we processed in the last 5 minutes or 10 minutes? And it was very, very chatty. One of the things we did for them was we actually rolled that up into a metric, and then we sent that downstream, and that was a little bit more optimal for them. That got rid of all the real chatty bits, and I think we ended up saving them. I think it was about 90% on that one logger metric. That it was just, again, just rolled it up into like 5 minute windows of things, right? We can condense, events to metrics, and then really, when it comes to the operational expense that's out there, uh, if you can, make a decision to say, hey, some of this stuff is better off just going to cold storage, like an S3, or a GC and GCP if you're over there, and their file storage, and not all of it go to uh, Datadog or Splunk or some other downstream location, right? And so it's really starting to understand and define, like, where do we need this data? Is this more for security purposes? Is this for some long-term archival? I'm just keeping it for 7 years because of audit reasons, right? And really start to go through your data with a fine-tooth comb and figure out, hey, this is valuable, this isn't.
And a third category of that you can reduce the data, you can route the data to different places, you can also transform the data. So that's another thing that we've found with customers when we help them profile their data. They realize, oh God, we've got 10 different formats for phone numbers, or each engineering team calls an error something different, which makes it nearly impossible for your downstream systems to be effective in putting together records or giving you statistics and trends and knowing what's going on. And the other thing that I'm sure all of you are aware of as well is, like, engineering teams are never going to have time to go back and change their logs. Everyone's got a lot more highly prioritized work to do, and updating logs is not going to be it. What Brandon's showing you here, what you can do is, once you realize in the profiling all these different formats or things, that if you could just clean it up a little bit, you'd have much better results. You can do that in one central place. So as the logs are streaming, as you're streaming through your pipeline, you can actually say, hey, here are the 10 formats that I identified, from my data profiling. Normalize them all into a single one, and then that's what gets sent into your various destinations. Or the reverse. If it comes in one and you need to change it a little bit before sending to different destinations, you can do that as well. Again, once you understand what it looks like from the source to start with, and you can do what you need to do after profiling it before you send it to the destination. One other example around things like PII, or like wanting to know that, did someone accidentally put a social security number or a credit card, in your logs? You can have, again, just one central like regex pattern, watching of the data that's going through the pipeline. And if it ever sees that, can alert you and then automatically either delete, encrypt, or mask that data. So by the time you never have that data stored in any of your destinations. And so again, the profiling will help inform the optimization steps you take.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the PII stuff, Mark, because a lot of times, customers or people that deal in that space, like if you're in healthcare or something, that stuff slipping or getting out there can be a huge breach for people. And so, having profiling, the ability to detect like, oh, this is a PII thing, this is a social security number or a credit card number, up front, it's almost like an insurance policy to some degree. It's the, hey, we're gonna make sure a breach doesn't happen before, if something doesn't get into a downstream system that people outside the team may have access to, or may not be as controlled or have fine grain, right? And so being able to like find that data, mask it, do something with it, completely reject it, is very, very beneficial, right? And it's very hard to do up close to the source. It's much easier to do kind of in a middleware piece of this stuff. All right. So since we're talking about pipelines here, like one of the things when it comes to profiling is profiling data at the source. So it is understanding the data that's coming in, right, from your applications, from your hosts, from all your servers. But because we're talking about pipelines and sort of a pipeline product, we actually have profiling on a destination as well, which is what data is going out, right? And so you may end up redacting a lot of stuff in your pipeline. You may decide to drop things. You may decide to get rid of stuff. From a profiling perspective, it would be really nice to know, hey, before I send this data to Datadog or Splunk, where I know that I can accrue a lot of costs, let me go ahead and limit that, or know with confidence that that data is going to be sent through or dropped or whatever, right? And so kind of giving a end-to-end perspective of data's coming in, data's going out, and we can kind of accurately determine this is what it's going to cost next month for a Datadog or for a Splunk, right? And give you a peace of mind that this thing, is doing what it says it does. And with that, actually add, kind of hard limits on stuff where, let's say that you've signed a contract with a downstream provider, and you've only got so many credits to spend. A lot of times those downstream providers will go ahead and take extra data. You'll just end up with a bill on the other end, right? And so the ability to actually limit that before data goes in and say, hey, we actually only want to spend, let's say, $5,000 this month on some downstream system, then you can actually put those limits in place and say, all right, notify me when we get close to that, or go ahead and completely turn off the spigot to this thing, right? Or different options that are there, right? So really kind of bend out that end-to-end flow so that you don't get bills or things that kind of sneak up on you as part of that. All right. So when we talk about not sending data to places, right, that's usually a very scary topic for your SREs or your app engineers I don't want to remove data in the middle of something, right? It's better for me to just send it all in case I do accidentally redact something, or I do get rid of something that I may need later on. we've thought about that from a product perspective, and some of the capabilities that we have is to actually take your data and say, hey, we're going to redact this data that we found as part of your profile that you said that you don't need. During an incident or during something that happens, we're going to flip that over and actually get you into what we call incident mode, which is we're going to send all the data, right? Or take a different pipe or a pathway to get to those downstream systems. So you're never kind of caught in this quandary of, hey, I set up these rules, something fell over, toppled over, I didn't know about it. Something bad happened, right? And so that's part of the profiling or alerting of that, of saying, hey, like we've noticed that there's a lot more errors that are coming through this system now. We've noticed that the log volume has increased on these hosts. We're going to actually flip over to an incident mode and allow that data to be sent through and be registered with that downstream, so you don't end up in a situation where you can't troubleshoot something or you can't figure out what the root issue was, right? And so really detect those incidences, detect when bad things are kind of happening as part of the profiling and the continuous profiling, and then enable that alternate path, right, downstream, right? And so you kind of get the best of both worlds where, 90% of the time, your log data, your telemetry data that's out there isn't super valuable. It is super valuable when I'm troubleshooting something, right? And so one of the strategies we worked through some customers was we took a very, very high reduction path with them and said, hey, we're going to actually, cut your logs down by 50%, right? And that worked for them for the majority of the cases until they had an incident. And then we flipped it on to full fidelity and let all this stuff go through, right? And that could be things based on what kind of log is this? Is this a debug log? Is this information log, right? So debug logs, good strategy is like just drop those. We don't need those until we have an incident, and then we may flip those on, right? Or in a lower environment, always drop debug logs, and then in production, for incidents and stuff, we send those things through. And so there's different kind of strategies. There's different patterns based on your business and your needs that you can put in there as part of your incident mode for this stuff.
Yeah. Additionally, on that, we've seen customers who will literally during an incident start sending some of that data to entirely different destinations. Mm-hmm. So specialized tools that they have, or other teams, and the systems that they use that are sort of the special forces, or people that they call in, or tools that they want to use when there is an incident been detected and they need that data. But as Brandon was talking about, on a day-to-day basis, often they don't need that data, and certainly not those tools or teams. So it allows you to, to optimize day to day without putting your overall observability at risk when you actually need it, which again goes back to this is all only possible if you have that clear map of your data in the first place. And so what we've been doing with customers and just people interested in doing this. And again, like you may already have ways to transform and clean and route your data. And really just the part that you're missing is like this very clear understanding, and that's fine too. And so, which again is why we really focus and help customers as our primary mission is help you with the data profiling piece. Cause that's something that's one of the hardest things to do, to get that view. And once you have that, that really opens it up for everything else. And so we've got a set of tools in our system that allows us to do this for you. Also, coming soon, you'll be able to do this self-serve yourself in the app, either with us helping you, or one issue that some people we've talked to have had is for certain companies, it can be a semi-onerous process to share any of your data with someone like Mezmo in order to do this profiling, prior to having, a real business engagement or contract in place. But again, we want you to be able to, to see for yourself, whether this will be, can help you. We believe it can, and have absolutely seen it can, but we want to make it as easy as possible for you to make that determination as well. And so something we're also working on is sort of there's two options. One, again, you can segment some small bit of your data, and we can set up a system where we can run it through the Mezmo profiling and share that information with you, as well as we're working on effectively a take-home test that you can run a smaller set of functionality just within your network on your own, and kind of report out to you to let you gauge when it's appropriate to take the next step and talking to us further about a more deeper profiling. And so for folks who are ready for that, or to file away for later, what we have is this data profiling offer for you. And again, this is to start looking to help you give that initial report. Some of those pictures Brandon showed about the broken down by patterns, by volume, by app and host and other methods, as well as the specific granular patterns, like these are the lines that are being repeated over and over, or these are the lines that are the same except for one key value pair at the end of it. And so, which gives you the opportunity to say, look, I don't want hundreds of thousands of these lines in a repetition, but it's critical for me to know, if a value on there is this, or if it changes. And so when you know that lets you then to the optimizations Brandon had discussed, of let you, kind of watch those lines, and only when they change, send one to your downstream systems, once you know what you're looking for via profiling. That's the gist of what we wanted to talk to you about today. I know, Brandon, do you have any other points? And then we'll go to the Q&A.
Nothing from my side.
All right. Well, then we are here to answer your questions.
Awesome. So Q&A has been announced. So anyone with questions, go ahead and send them in. We've received a couple, and so we'll start just taking them from the top, guys. So how difficult is all of this to do, to compile all this data and to really read through the noise?
So really, this is what we've created the tool for. So to actually do it is really simple. Like I said, sometimes there's a bit of a process in place to determine what data you'll be able to share to run that initial exercise, but that's really the hardest part. Once we have that, it's a simple configuration to run it through our system, and then you saw some examples of the types of reports that come out that are, again, very granular with 80% of your data is coming from this app. Is that an important app, or has something gone awry, or like this line here that says, hey, I'm alive, is being repeated by coming out of one of your machines over and over and over. So it's a very simple process once you decide what data you want to share with us.
Yeah, and I'll add on there. We actually worked with one client that had started down the path of building out their own profiling for their telemetry data, and it was a very interesting conversation when we got in there. And one of the things that came to us was like, yeah, this is actually a lot harder than we originally anticipated, and kind of thought, because on the surface level it seems like it's pretty simple, but one of the things that we do here at Mezmo, and it kind of gives us a kind of a different spin on it, is like we have several algorithms in our back pocket that we kind of bring the forefront. And if you don't have a strong data background, right, depending on your hat that you're wearing, it may seem very simple on the surface, but once you start getting several layers deep, there's lots of things that you need to start looking at from an optimization standpoint, from a do I use this algorithm or that algorithm for it? And so that's kind of where we bring our own expertise to the puzzle of this thing.
So yes, free and easy. And again, we want you to be able to see for yourself. Like if we run the report and it's like, there's really only 5% noise here, it might not be worth, taking additional steps. But if it comes back and it's, at least half your data are just the low hanging fruit, then it is worth a deeper conversation. But we want to make sure you're in control of how to decide that.
Perfect. So how often should one need to profile data?
Brandon?
You take that. All right. I would say at least once a month. If you're doing one of those things where it's like, I just want to see how things have changed. I would say at least once a month. That's a good cadence, right? Maybe it is whatever your development release cycle is. Um, and again, it depends on where you're kind of sitting. If you're sitting in more of an SRE, a DevOps role, where you're in the middle between a lot of application teams, right? Or you have kind of different things coming at you from different directions, you may not have a lot of visibility into that data, but you may be responsible for downstream systems, right? And so profiling more often on that stuff becomes super valuable. One of the things that we kind of push and want people to lean into is more that continuous nature, which is you're going to know when changes happen, right? The sooner that you can get in front of problems or issues or massive spikes and not get caught off guard, the better off you are every time.
So what do you most commonly see as the outcome when people go in and profile their data?
Really, again, it's often pretty shocking. Of it's literally that blatant of, hey, these 5 lines make up an outrageous percentage of the data that you are currently paying to process and store, and is in the way when you're looking for actually something specific in there. You have to query and filter all that out. And so that's really the most common of almost every time we run this. It's been very eye-opening to the team responsible for dealing with all this data, of just the amount, both the amount of garbage that can be easily filtered out before we even get to, making any sort of decisions around, should we keep this and just route it to, cold storage or something else? And also, again, this sort of load balancing between the value of your systems and the rough amount of data they should be producing. You can kind of see, again, if a team have just enabled all kinds of information while they were doing development, but then can turn that off. You can just make sure that the volume of data from each of your sources, regardless of the specifics of it, which we also share, is it appropriate for the number of users or amount of information and importance of that information coming through the system.
Yeah. And I'll say every single time we've had this conversation with customers that we've done this with, it's always led to okay, I know which team I need to go talk to. I know where this problem's at, or it's always spurred additional conversations to get the right people in the right place to actually determine things, right? So if you're sitting in kind of more of a leadership role, or you're kind of over several different teams or stuff, a lot of times it's hard to have that visibility into what's causing this bill to increase, right? I don't even know where to have that conversation. And so sometimes just pointing in the right direction gets you on the way to success with this stuff. And that's what the profiling will start to uncover.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. This looks to be our last question so far. So if any of our audience members has any additional questions, this is last call. So all of this sounds great, but sometimes we run into challenges with sharing data to external tools. Is there a way to use Mezmo to do this internally?
Yeah, that's what I kind of touched on earlier, of where, yes, we've taken 2 approaches with that. Of, again, one, kind of work with you to figure out, well, what's a set of safe data, that can avoid, compliance officers, getting fully involved, or just things that are maybe some development data, things you can share, because typically there's enough patterns in there that you can get the idea of, even if it's not a data source that you're really looking to optimize, you can at least understand the sort of patterns that will likely carry over to the other systems. And then also, again, we're currently working on a sort of take-home test that you can run fully internally to give you that flavor as well, and ideally help you in that conversation to enable more data sharing for the larger tool.
All right. Well, gentlemen, I'm not seeing any more questions at this point, but I do want to give each of you the opportunity to leave our audience with any closing remarks before we start shutting that down. I'll give you just a moment to think on that. And in the meantime, I'll just remind everyone that we have been recording our session today. You will be receiving that recording as soon as it becomes available. And we'll also be keeping it alive on the DevOps website. That's devops.com/webinars, and it will be in the on-demand section. All right, Marc, do you want to start bringing us home?
Sure. I mean, the key point again is, knowledge is power. That it doesn't matter what tools or processes or people you have. If you don't know what you're dealing with, it's nearly, you're just stabbing in the dark of how to improve things. And again, we've seen repeatedly where teams we're working with are suddenly told, hey, you need to cut the data that you're able to store and use for searching and doing your jobs in half. And the sad result usually is, they get half of everything, which means they still have, the full catalog of events that are of no use to them, and now only half or a quarter, of the ones that they really need. And so what profiling really lets you do is really prepare yourselves for, and proactively cut down your data volumes, by half, or more. And then let the budget savings occur as a result of you actually increasing your observability, which that's sort of the big flip that the data profiling lets you do.
All right, Brandon, closing thoughts?
Yeah, I'll speak it from more of a SRE or a DevOps kind of hat, where there's nothing worse than being pulled in, to your boss's office or into a conversation about costs or something of that nature, where it's like, why is my bill so high? Like, how did we get here? And you're caught in this middle between application folks that are building things and putting things out there and other tools and systems that are there, and you don't have good answers to stuff, right? It's really hard to come up with that. And what this allows you to do, good profiling, is like, at least start here, at least find, this is where the problems are at, so you can have those conversations and you don't end up kind of in a situation where it's, okay, we'll go figure this out and go spend several months looking for where all the skeletons are kind of hidden in the closets and that kind of stuff. So data profiling gives you that insight into things that, you would otherwise have to go find and figure things out on your own. And it can be painful. I've built it from scratch before.
Awesome. Well, Marc, Brandon, thank you both so much for joining us today. It's been such an awesome 45 minutes spending time with you. And I know a whole lot more about the Mezmo platform and data profiling than I think I knew before. So thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So just a couple of final closing thoughts. We will be selecting 2 of our most engaged attendees today to win a $50 Amazon gift card. So be sure to fill out our post-webinar survey to be eligible. I'd like to thank Mezmo for sponsoring our program today. And to our audience, thank you so much for spending time with us. We appreciate you, and we really hope to see you at a future Techstrong Learning Experience. Have a great rest of your day, and you may now disconnect. Thanks again, guys.